So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Andrew Wright. I'm the Vice President of Digital Medicine at Otsuka. Before we start, I just want to give you an overview of the expectations of this session. So the intent is the panel here, including the robot on my left shoulder, which is a bit scary, is going to go through some very short, succinct presentations, which is really helping to characterize the disease, the opportunities, and areas that are ripe for development. However, really we want to spend most of the time working with you to look at opportunities for both technology development and innovation to improve lives for patients and caregivers who have Alzheimer's. So that's the intent of the session. I'll explain a little bit in more detail, but we really are throwing out a challenge to people in the audience, and should you accept it, we hope you'll take up this mission, which we will give all our support to help give you the perspective of the Alzheimer's patient and the journey they're on. So again, before I start, let me just ignore this update. Isn't it funny how updates come through right as you're doing a presentation? I want to ask you a simple question. During the course of this panel, how many people worldwide will develop dementia? So if you'd like to use your crowd mics, you should see some choices there. Okay. Give it a few more seconds. Great. This question must have been too easy because 70% of you got it right. It is in fact D. The answer is around around 900. So approximately every 3 seconds, someone will develop this incurable disease. So today, there are an estimated 47 million people with dementia, and every 20 years, that number's going to double. So that's actually the focus of why we're here today. Our work at Otsuka and GCAD has taught us that technology has a key role to play in helping people. Right now, some of the most promising treatments are actually emerging from technology. And technology is converging with research and medical treatment. So you're getting this perfect storm, if you like, of biology and technology coming together. After all, biology is simply code. So big data, brain imaging, brain simulation, each of these is really beginning to push the field forwards. And this progress is desperately and badly needed. So just consider this. The last time a wholly new drug was approved for Alzheimer's, maps were still made of paper, cameras took pictures with film, and we rented VHS tapes. So there's probably some people in the audience that don't even understand what I just said. So as technology has revolutionized our lives, Alzheimer's been completely stuck. So this slow progress isn't due to lack of effort. Some of the world's best scientists and the best doctors are working non-stop to make better medicines. But perhaps it's one of the hardest questions in medicine to answer. And that's why we're actually here today, and that's why we need you in the audience, and that's why we want this to be a very interactive session. We need technology to disrupt Alzheimer's. There's a really significant opportunity here. And over the past few years, we have seen a number of developments, technology developments in Alzheimer's come to market, and there has been some progress, but there does need to be more. And again, that's why we're here. We want to talk to you about Alzheimer's. We want to show you the journey that people undergo. We want to show you where the market for technology intervention is ripe, so this is user-centered design. And we're doing everything we can to make better medicines. Now we ask you, what can you do with technology? So with that, I want to introduce Dr. Jeff Cummings. Dr. Cummings is the director of the Cleveland Clinic Ruvo Center for Brain Health. He's a world-renowned Alzheimer's researcher and physician. Dr. Cummings?
Thank you, Andrew. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to take you first through the enormous gains in brain understanding that we've had in the past decade for Alzheimer's disease. And then I want to show how that redounds on the patient's life and on the caregiver's life, and to invite you to be disruptive. This is one of the few times I'll ask the panel or ask the audience to be disruptive, because we're looking for a way not to disrupt Alzheimer's disease, but to disrupt the impact that Alzheimer's disease has on people's lives. And we think technology can do that, and we think the ideas are right in this room. So taking the top panel, you see that there's an increasing spread of that tan color. That is increasing amyloid. This is the plaque of Alzheimer's disease. So it starts, patients do not have any symptoms, and then progressively gets worse. At some point, it triggers the blue panel below. So that is the tau protein, or the tangles. So Alzheimer's disease has plaques that you see above, and it has tangles that you see below, and each of those are increasing over time in the brain, and they're killing the nerve cells that comprise the physical basis for our mental life. See also that the brain is shrinking, physically shrinking. So on the left-hand side, you see a robust brain, the kind that all of you have right now. And on the right-hand side, you see the kind of shrunken brain, so-called acorn brain, that patients with Alzheimer's disease develop over time. Next slide. Now, I want to show you the journey that the patient with Alzheimer's disease goes on. And you were handed this out at the beginning of as you came in the door. So if I could have the next slide, then I can take people through the journey of Alzheimer's disease. It starts, and patients are asymptomatic. So this is something that we have just learned, that the protein is accumulating in the brain before any symptoms begin. So that what we know is that by the age of 70, 30% of all patients of all people already have the amyloid protein in the brain. By the age of 85, half of everyone who lives to that age has Alzheimer's disease. Look around. Every other person in this room will have Alzheimer's disease if you live to the age of 85. That's a challenge that we're facing. That's a challenge that we want to have you help us answer. Symptoms gradually develop. Patients develop mild cognitive impairment. They can't remember. They begin to ask the same questions again and again. Eventually, a threshold is crossed, and the patient is taken to see the doctor. That threshold is usually something like forgetting something really important, your daughter's birthday, or driving the wrong way on the road, in a road that you knew very well all along. That threshold is crossed. You go to the doctor, but doctors are largely uninformed about Alzheimer's disease. So they're likely to say, oh, he's 75, this is just normal aging. Patient worsens, there's more forgetfulness, there's more disorientation, there might be mood changes. They go back to the doctor. Usually a diagnosis is made at that point. Maybe they go to a specialist. They then are started on medications. Sometimes they're started on medications, but no diagnosis is given. So they don't actually know that they have Alzheimer's disease, even though they check the internet and they realize they're on a medication for Alzheimer's disease. Now the patient gets worse, and now disability really begins, and now the dependency on the caregiver is greatly exaggerated. And I should have made the point at the beginning that this is not the journey of a patient only. This is the journey of a family. This is a group of people who love this individual and gradually see them wasting away cognitively as the disease robs them of their memory and of even their self-identity. Finally, of course, disability is completely disabling, and eventually the patient succumbs to their Alzheimer's disease, usually about a decade after the onset of symptoms. So this is the journey that they're on. This is the journey that we think you can help people with. That it's a journey where great opportunities for technology exist. And to continue the discussion, I'm going to introduce Terry Bradwell. Terry is the head of innovation and strategy for AARP. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cummings. Pleasure to be here today as well. One of the things that really intrigues me about what Dr. Cummings just presented is this notion of a journey. Alzheimer's is a journey. And just like with most journeys, things change. Unfortunately, with Alzheimer's, typically things go from a bad situation to a worse situation. This is one of the things that at AARP, we hear from the caregiver countless times, is that they are on this journey, and it's a journey that as soon as you feel that you're at a place where you have a status quo, all of a sudden the ground just shifts up under you again, and you never know exactly how to anticipate the next step. So if we're going to truly, truly disrupt Alzheimer's, we really have to really understand that journey also from the perspective of the caregiver. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, and really introduce you to two stories. These are two stories that we have heard personally, and it's many stories. There's nothing sensational about these stories, but each one of these stories are very, very impactful. So the first person I want to introduce you to is Steve. Steve was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 9 months ago. It was just shy of his 69th birthday. Steve lives alone. He's divorced. And about 9 months after the diagnosis, he has lost 50 pounds gradually. And Steve's problem is that he won't eat because he can't remember to eat. So his daughter, very, very alarmed with this very, very constant and gradual weight loss, has tried a plethora of things to try to get him to encourage him to eat, to remind him to eat. One of the things that she tried first, of course, is just using smartphone technology, setting up some calendar, sophisticated calendar reminders on the phone, just reminding him to eat. This worked for a little while, but after some time, because of Steve's deteriorating condition, the beats were just that. They were just sounds. They were just noises. And for him, it was more irritating because he could not remember why this particular alarms were going off. And so his daughter also tried different things in terms of coming over to his home and preparing meals for him for the week, so he could have his meals already pre-prepared and make it as easy as possible for Steve in terms of just warming up his meals in the microwave so he can have nutrition in his body. Again, this worked for some time, but as time progressed, his daughter noticed that most of the food stayed in the refrigerator, and a lot of times she would find just countless packages of food in the microwave, because during the time he took it out of the refrigerator, got to the microwave, there was a memory loss that he didn't remember that he had the food in the microwave. And so despite the fact of Steve's doctor constantly reminding him and constantly encouraging him that he needs to have a well-balanced and nutritious meals, because unfortunately, without that nutrition, most basic thing that we all need, it will cause this condition to even deteriorate much faster. And so that's Steve's journey that he's on. And this is an ongoing struggle that Steve is having. I also like to introduce you to someone else. This is Jennifer. Jennifer is taking care of her mother. She made a decision to quit her job about 1.5 years ago. Jennifer feels that she's absolutely doing the right thing because she does not want her mom in an assisted facility living. She wanted to make sure that she was able to be in her home with the dignity and loved ones around her. So she quit her job. Her husband still works. She has several kids that are in school. And so financially, this has become a hardship for Jennifer. But Jennifer has some other issues that she has to deal with her mom. Her mom not only has Alzheimer's, she also has high blood pressure. She has a skin condition. She has diabetes. During the course of a day, her mother has to take over 11 different medications. And not all of them are in pill form. Some of them are in powder form. Some of them are liquid. Some have to be injected several times a week. Some needs to be refrigerated. So she uses solutions of today. We all understand those pill boxes that organizes pills for us and helps us keep track of when medicines needs to be taken. But unfortunately, because of the complexity of the different issues that her mother has to deal with, this solution is not working for her. And so that's Jennifer's story. And I can tell you countless more stories just like this that are going on in the lives of the 40 million caregivers that are out there. And again, when you're talking about Alzheimer's, these stories are not stories that will have happy endings until there's a solution that's found. But what technology can do, absolutely can do, maybe not give the happy ending, but make for a better tomorrow. So really, that's our call to action to you, is help us with these solutions that can give these caregivers an opportunity to have a better tomorrow as they're taking care of the most important things in their lives, their loved ones. You know, most of us that are out here at the conference, most of us are not local to Las Vegas, so we fly in. And one of the things that you hear on an airplane when they're doing their announcements is making sure that you put your oxygen mask on first so you can take care of others. And that's what we're looking for here with the caregiver. Let's find ways in which we can help them put that oxygen mask on first so they can take care of others as well. And so we'll talk a little bit more about some of the technology solutions that are prominent, and I'd like to introduce on my right here, in terms of coming at us as a robot, Dr. Alice Milanidis. And let me give a little bit more background on the professor here. Excuse me one second. Just want to make sure I am doing him proper here. Alex is a research chair of rehabilitation technology at the University of Toronto and an associate professor in the Department of Occupational Science. He's also a scientific director at the AgeWell Canada, which is a research network at the intersection of aging and technology. One of the reasons Alex couldn't be with us today because he is doing a little bit of a caregiving of his own because he has a newborn that's just days old. So we're having him here with technology as a robot. So, Alex?
Very much, Terry. Is everyone okay?
Yep.
Hear me okay?
Yes, we
Yep.
can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks very much virtually as I'm at home with a newborn baby person. Hopefully this is the next. So at this point, I really like to now take my thoughts on the technology, dementia, and really give you some of my and what the new promising direction, approaches, and solutions. So we have made significant strides over the past 50 years in the use of technology to support older adults. An increase in the amount of research in this area. Importantly, is we interest from the industry really becoming a valuable asset. However, despite all of this, quite a lack of real-world technologies into the market. The primary reason for very poor job actually understanding the needs of these individuals with types of problems, focusing. Moving forward, will really become more solutions, not only for the current older adult population. We need to recognize demographic change. There should be new expectations of how to support. Users are more expecting technology to be fully integrated into their daily lives in the management of their own health and wellness. Furthermore, as we do, caregiver paradigm is also from the dynamic where the caregiver who's most likely out with the first dementia to more distributed models that are comprised of caregivers who are providing across the country. All these factors more development. So furthermore, tackled and appreciate the truly challenging and difficult problems that are faced.
Can't pick up lag.
We refer to these problems as wicked problems.
There we go.
Wicked problems are those that are difficult to understand and solve. They are the private, embarrassing, everyday issues that become more challenging as dementia progresses. They are the problems that, for the most part, affect the independence and quality of life of people with dementia and their caregivers. Now, don't get me wrong, we have seen some great solutions and products that are helping older adults to better manage the effects of dementia in its earlier stages, such as apps to help manage daily schedules or technology to help maintain social connectedness. However, what we've not seen are solutions that are helping support these individuals with the everyday tasks that become more difficult as the disease progresses. such as the simple things that we take for granted every day: getting dressed, taking care of ourselves, eating, and even drinking. It is really the inability to complete these types of activities that eventually leads to older adults being removed from their own homes and communities and being placed into formal care. So to tackle these wicked problems, we need new and cutting-edge solutions. And this is why we're here at the CES show talking with all of you. We need to look beyond what we've been doing thus far to come up with solutions that have the potential to support older adults with dementia through difficult and challenging activities and tasks, especially as they progress through the mild to moderate and perhaps even the severe stages of the disease. We have already started to see the emergence of development of new technologies in key areas that have great potential and opportunities. These areas include robotics, smart homes, and big data, three topics that we've already heard quite a bit about at the CES show. The use of smart homes to support older adults with dementia has been investigated for many years. Now, these are not your typical smart homes that adjust your thermostat or turn your lights on or off. We are talking and looking at smart homes that use advanced systems and actuators to monitor these individuals during a variety of activities and tasks, providing assistance as needed. For example, the home may be able to detect that the person's having difficulty remembering the steps on how to brush their teeth and will provide them with prompts and reminders. Or there may be robots providing cognitive support and social connectedness. Now, no matter what the technologies or the actuators may be, whether they're sensors or robots, the key idea here is that the smart home really acts as the infrastructure or the backbone so that all these devices can work together seamlessly and work for the person. Now, next, in terms of robotics, this is an area that's gaining a lot of momentum in the care of older adults with dementia. As the cost of robots have fallen over the past several years, the potential for such technologies to provide support in a variety of capacities is becoming even more of a reality. We've seen robots used to provide cognitive support and assistance to older adults with dementia during everyday tasks such as making a cup of tea, as shown on this slide. And we've also seen robots be used for cognitive stimulation through various social interactions and game playing. Now, robotics has also expanded to new and exciting areas such as driverless cars, and we've heard many different great examples of driverless cars so far at CES. There is great hope for this type of technology in the support of older adults, in particular those with dementia as they start to lose their ability to drive and eventually their licenses. However, while driverless cars may be a solution to this growing problem, much more research and investigation into their usability and efficacy is required, and a partnership between us researchers in the area of dementia and those people developing these types of technologies is greatly needed. Finally, big data is starting to become more pervasive in all aspects of our lives. We're already seeing the effects of this field in healthcare, and we're now starting to realize the importance and potential of it in the care of older adults with dementia. In fact, the use of big data is already showing very promising results. Studies have been completed that have shown that such data can help to predict changes in a person's cognitive and physical capabilities. And more recently, we have shown that such data can be used to actually predict the onset or the development of dementia in an older adult from the analysis of just simple motion data captured from a person's home over a period as short as 3 months. So you can imagine the importance and the powerfulness of that type of tool. We're also starting to see the use of big data to tackle quite wicked problems, such as identifying and predicting adverse and potentially dangerous behaviors such as aggression and acts of violence, which is all over our media when it comes to our long-term care facilities. So to wrap up, technology does have the potential to play a significant role in the support of older adults with dementia and their caregivers. However, we need to make sure that we fully understand the problems that these individuals face on a daily basis and what the true issues are that are affecting their independence and quality of life. We have made significant strides already in this field with several new products that are starting to make a difference. However, we've only scratched the surface, in my opinion. We need to start to shift more of our attention from developing technological solutions for those problems that are seen as low-hanging fruit and quick wins to solutions that will truly make a difference in the lives of older adults with dementia and their families. So I'll stop there, and at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. I've got a number of questions in already from the audience on crowdsource. Please feel free to add. Nobody's been yet brave enough to use the mic, so there's the challenge. So the first one, Alex, coming from the world of pharmaceuticals and technology, I often hear unmet need and use cases and user-centered design. You use this term wicked problem. Can you describe that a little bit more about exactly what you mean? Because this could potentially be an area that is ripe for innovation.
Sure. So wicked problems really differs from the different users and the different types of people that have dementia. So a wicked problem for one person may be, as I said, a task that we take for granted, such as getting dressed in the morning. For someone else, it may be using the toilet. For someone else, it may be hydration. And these are all issues that are really become serious things that we need to look at, and that we can't just simply overlook within the design of new technologies.
Right, and you made a little bit of a comment in a just conversation we had yesterday about where designers tend to focus on a user-centered design approach versus where you really feel they should spend their time and effort.
Yes, yeah, and it's interesting, we go through these user-centered design approaches in all of our projects, and we tend to always see the same kind of thing, that designers listen to the problems that older adults with dementia have, they listen to the problems that the families talk about, and, inherently the families always start with your typical things such as, maintaining their schedule or attending their appointments, reminding them to take their medication. And then they really do move on to these wicked problems, and they really start to talk about the true stressors in the relationship between themselves as the caregiver and the individual with dementia, such as using the toilet or other private activities. But what we've always seen typically is the designers tend to start to tune those wicked problems out, and they say, well, I heard, the fact that they can't maintain their schedule or they can't remember to attend an appointment, so let's start to design some simple technologies that can do that. And that's great. Those are needed. But as I said, in my discussion here, is those really are problems that people in the very early to mild stages are facing. And it's when you get to those moderate stages or those severe stages where the person can no longer really care for themselves, that's where the care breaks down. And that's where, when we talk to caregivers and we ask, well, what was your decision point to take your loved one out of their home and into a long-term care facility, it tends to be those latter problems that I discussed.
Jeff, would you like to add to that? I mean, what keeps people at home? What puts them in?
Well, I think certainly the toileting issues are very difficult. And then the other major contributor to nursing home placement or institutionalization is behavioral problems. And of course, we use medications for behavioral problems, but often there's a lack of communication between the caregiver and the physician. And I think there would be an opportunity to film, for example, an agitated episode on your film, get that to the doctor for the electronic medical record, so that when the caregiver uses the word agitation, for example, is that the same thing that the doctor would choose to use a medication for? Sometimes it will be and sometimes it won't. So I think there are technology applications that could help control agitation, which is a common precipitant of institutionalization.
I would just double down on what Alex said. A lot of times with user-centered design, we do stop short of those, and I love the way you framed it, those wicked problems. Speaking just from my own experience, I dealt with a parent with dementia, very, very severe, wasn't quite Alzheimer's, but the same type of symptoms that were there. And the type of wicked problems that I had to deal with had nothing to do more so with the scheduling aspects and things that we could use technology for, but it was just basic things, going to the bathroom, whether it's at home or someplace else. Again, with the example I used early on, just keeping her eating, keeping her drinking her fluids and things of that nature, just taking a bath. Just taking a wash up. But then it was really the emotional problems that were the biggest problems that we had to deal with, because her emotions became, really changed very, very radically. So those are the type of things that I would like to see us dig deeper into as we begin to design solutions that are going to help the caregiver, really deal with some of these wicked problems that Alex mentioned earlier.
Right. Thank you. So at the beginning, I think the journeys were handed out, and Dr. Cummings actually went through the 5 stages. Another question here, which is, which areas do you think is most ripe for innovation? So I'll start with you, Jeff.
Okay, well, I really liked Terry's example of using the airline model of put your own mask on first, and that allows you to help the patient. So you need to take care of yourself first. So I'm thinking about technologies that would help the caregiver take care of the patient. And one of the things I was thinking about, for example, is now they can't go out to dinner because it's very difficult to take a person out to dinner. So every meal has to now be prepared by the caregiver. So what would I like? I'd like a voice-activated computer in my kitchen that says, it's dinner time, and I want to know what to serve. So a menu comes up. That menu is informed by good nutrition for brain health. That menu is informed by what I have had for the last 4 weeks, and that menu is informed by what I have already ordered from an automatic delivery service. So I don't have to think about this at all. It's all there. It's nutrition. It's helping me take care of my patient the best that I can. So it's that kind of technology that I'd like to see coming in. And one other point I'd like to make is that I think integration of the technologies is so important. We don't want a cell phone full of apps, each one monitoring whether you're taking your medication and whether he's approaching the door and whether he's had enough food to eat. We need an integrated solution to taking care of Alzheimer's patients.
Yeah, I think integration is the key, because if we look at any of our smartphones that we're carrying here, we have dozens of apps, and typically they are all we use them with some degree of specificity on what our needs are. But when you're playing that role of the caregiver, it's really, you have just this universal problem that depending on the state of care that you're providing for a loved one, it is 24/7. So that integration aspect is absolutely key. Also, Alex mentioned this earlier, we talk a lot about big data. Usually when we're talking about big data, it's from the perspective of, big businesses now, they use the data in terms of understanding some of the bigger problems in the world. But within our home, there's a lot of data that we're collecting as well that can give us some of those insights that we need to know, just as Jeff was saying here, when we're getting ready to do something as trivial and basic as preparing a meal, we need to understand, well, what is the best meal at this possible time right now, today, that we can prepare for our loved ones. And we have the data, if we have the technology in our homes, to be able to collect that type of information and use it. So I would love to see us do more with big data in the home.
Right. Alex?
Yeah, I just want to concur with everything that's being said. I think what technology really can do is to help connect that journey and make it as seamless and as easy as possible for the caregivers and the individuals with dementia to go through. Right now, the current state of technology is, through those various stages of the journey, you'd probably have to use, multiple different types of technologies, all that do not talk with each other, connect with each other, and it really just becomes frustrating for the user at the end of the day. So from an innovation point of view and from the expertise that, we probably have in the audience here and elsewhere, this whole aspect of seamless technology that's fully integrated into their daily lives throughout their journey is really critical for the success of this field.
Thank you. You touched on it a little bit, and it was part of the question, which is what could keep them out of being put in the home? Because I would believe there are some reimbursement opportunities there. It's what families want. So any guidance there from a technology standpoint and an innovation standpoint? It seems like you both very much touched on food and nutrition. Were there any other areas that could prevent people having to be put into homes that could keep them at home longer?
So you touched on toileting as being a particular problem, and it is. And part of it is that patients don't remember where the bathroom is. And it's not that they are completely without memory. It is that their memory is often severely compromised. So if you can begin very early on through technology to make it very clear where the bathroom is, and you keep training that, and there's an alarm so that people are toileted regularly as opposed to waiting, you can extend the period in which toileting is less of a problem. So there are solutions, however primitive they seem, that depend on technology that can help us with these wicked problems, these core deficits that emerge in people who have Alzheimer's disease.
Alex, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think it even kind of goes deeper than just those high-level prompts or reminders that can be provided. When we've done work with caregivers and families, and we talk about, for example, the issue around toileting, we often hear things such as, well, I have to remain with, my father all the time when he's using the toilet because he forgets to pull his pants up when he gets off the toilet and he falls over and trips and he's broken his hip in the past. So it's kind of really understanding the subtleties of those different activities and where technology could play a role. Now, obviously, we're nowhere near to having technology that can help a person pull their pants up, but we can detect that they haven't done that perhaps through some sophisticated sensing, and there are examples of these, and then provide the reminders to these individuals to do just those very, You know, I said subtle kind of innate activities are really important for the success for a person to remain independent.
And the important thing to remember is that, you know, there's not a need for radical technologies that haven't been invented. The technologies are out there. They're just fragmented. They're disparate. But they can be repurposed. You know, I heard a story this morning when do you all remember the smart fork that came out? It was a fork that basically had a gyroscope in it, and it's connected to the internet and it helped you monitor how much you were eating. So if you're eating too fast, it makes you slow down in your eating. Well, that didn't go over too well. Wasn't a big market for it. But they were able to take that same type of technology and use it for folks that had tremors and things of that nature. So it allowed them to eat much more with dignity. They can take that same fork, it had the gyroscope on it and things of that nature, and it balanced their meal, and it helped them to be able to feed themselves again, live with dignity. So it's not that the technologies are not there. They are there. It's just a matter of those technologies coming together in much more of an integrated fashion, in a usable fashion.
That's the perfect lead into the next question. So another question here, only for Alzheimer's. Could the technologies that help Alzheimer's patients and caregivers also apply to other disease areas? Jeff?
Well, I think for sure some of these technologies would apply to other conditions in older individuals. For example, most patients who have Parkinson's disease will eventually, towards the end of their illness, develop a dementia syndrome. So many of the kind of cognitive technologies that we're talking about today could be applied to patients with Parkinson's disease as they develop cognitive impairment. Patients who have stroke, patients who have had traumatic brain injury, all face many of the same difficulties that patients with Alzheimer's disease have. So I think the market for this, just to put this into market terms, is enormous. There are 5.5 million victims of Alzheimer's disease in the United States today. And then we add on top of that Parkinson's disease, stroke. There are so many patients who need these kinds of applications, and I think they can extend well beyond the Alzheimer's disease population, Andrew.
Yeah, I would double down on that and agree, and especially in the realm of the caregiver, because the journey, whether it's some form of dementia that may not be Alzheimer's, or whether it's Parkinson's, or whether it's ALS, the journey sometimes is the same for the caregiver. Their lives are being very, very dramatically impacted, and one of the things that we have to also consider when we're talking about the caregiver is about, you know, going back to that notion of putting your mask on first. It's not just about educating yourself and things of that nature, but it's also keeping yourself healthy. Because especially, I think Dr. Cummings was explaining this to me yesterday, from the time that you are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you typically have an average of about 10 years of life. And, but that 10-year journey for a caregiver is one of the longest journeys that they will ever go through in their lives. And so within that time, they really do have to have the type of things that are going to help them not only just prepare for that journey, but also take care of themselves and be connected.
Great. Alex, anything to add?
Yeah, I just support everything that's being said. Now, the one word of caution I do want to give, though, is while many times technologies we develop for people with Alzheimer's can translate to other diseases and user populations, we've actually found it does not work the other way around. We've seen many people try to take technology that they've designed for other user populations and apply them to people with dementia, and they failed miserably. What we need to understand as designers is that dementia and Alzheimer's is such a unique disease with its own unique set of requirements from a design aspect that we have to be very cautious when we develop technologies for them and think that we can easily just take them from a different field and generalize it to this group.
Great, thank you. This is another kind of focus question, which should the focus be more on the caregiver or patient or both? Who's the priority here? Jeff?
So I'm not sure that I got...
So that if somebody wanted to develop some kind of digital tool or
Yes. technology,
should they focus on the caregiver as the end user or the patient?
Yes, right. So I think we've been struggling with this issue. I think there are technologies for the caregiver. We've kind of emphasized those in the discussion so far. I think we haven't talked very much about the technologies for the patient, and I think particularly the early patient, where memory is starting to be eroded by the disease, but it's not gone. They still have many capabilities. They can still think logically. They can still use a lot of language, but the kind of reminding technology that I think is easily within our reach would be very useful to these patients. I think integration of GPS so that they can remember where they're going, for example, although we recommend against driving. But in the earliest stages, of course, people continue to drive, even though they have some degree of memory impairment. So integrating GPS into their driving, integrating many kinds of reminders, including medication reminders, appointment reminders, all the kinds of calendar functions that determine our day, I think are programmable into a device that would be very helpful to the early stage patients. And then of course, they progress. This is the idea of the journey. Patients who start mild are going to get more severe, and they're going to need a changing repertoire of technologies to respond to their increasing dependency over the course of the disease.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say both. This is something, I mean, think about, we're using this notion of the journey. You know, do car manufacturers just focus on the passenger, or do they focus on also the driver? Do they focus on both? And I think organizations that have either the capacity or want to have a commitment in this area, you should focus on those areas where you have the biggest opportunity to make a difference. You know, for us at AARP, we're really focused on the caregiver. You heard earlier, this is the year of the caregiver. I think this is going to be the decade of the caregiver, basically. And so it's one of the areas that we're highly focused because, again, we realize that the caregiving aspect of Alzheimer's and other debilitating diseases where you're put in a situation where you have to care for the most important thing in your life, and having the tools to be able to do that is very, very important. But to me, it's not one or the other. You have to really focus on both sides of it.
I think another point that strikes me is we've been talking mostly about the dyad of a spouse who's sitting right next to the patient. Many caregivers are in the workforce, and they've got an affected parent at home. And there's a real opportunity for technology to be able to help that person who's sitting in their office, and they want to check to see how mom is doing at home. And they also want to create an easy way for mom to call if something happens. So there are many kinds of technologies because there's many kinds of caregiver settings in which these are evolving.
Great point. Alex, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I concur with everything that's being said. You know, we can't ignore either party. You know, they're both our customers from a technology and a commercialization perspective. The way we tend to look at it, though, is, you know, in the earlier, milder stages of the disease, our primary customer is the older adult. But as the disease progresses and a lot of the decisions are being made now by the families or the caregivers, they tend now to become our primary customer as well. But it's really important to have a key understanding of both perspectives right from the start of any design of any type of technological solution.
Great, thank you. So I think we've got time for two more questions. I'm going to take one more from the messages. And we actually have somebody brave enough to try out the mic, so that will be the second one. So the first one, and this is just to you, Dr. Cummings, are there any drugs currently available that are altering the progression of Alzheimer's?
So there are no drugs currently available that are known to slow the progression. The two classes of medications that we have now improve the symptoms, the cognitive symptoms, and they delay decline. That is, they delay the period in which the decline becomes obvious again. Those are important interventions, and we use them, we recommend them. The class of drugs that we are trying to discover now, and there are many of these drugs in clinical trials, are those that will intervene in that basic plaque or tangled disease process that I talked about earlier in the program. So we are really trying to find disease-modifying molecules now that will keep people functioning at the highest possible level for the longest possible time. And of course, that's going to demand early intervention, and then these technologies are going to be very critical for these people who are in mild stages now for long periods of time.
Right, thank you. So Dr. Nick, hopefully you're in the audience, and I'm going to hit the button, so you should be able to use your smartphone. Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
I'm going to try and do this secretly, but I guess not. Is it working? I can't tell.
It's coming out on here, so.
Okay. I'm excited by the technology, just frustrated with the network, but...
Isn't that often the way?
It's always the case.
So the question for each of you, you know, you've got 170,000 technical folks here. What one thing, and recognizing it's not just about technology that could solve the problem, would allow Alzheimer, dementia age in their home comfortably, safely, and without undue burden on the family, which is one of the reasons that people try and shift the method. Is there anything that you can think of that would be, may not be there, but all bets are off? What could we do that we could really change that equation?
Jeff?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I can give you.
I would challenge, I guess, the assumption that there is going to be one solution, because it's such a complicated problem. I think that's that's what you've heard here as we've been talking. It's so complicated that I can't quite think about one thing that would make the difference. I mean, you could. Things like locks that lock when the person approaches the door would keep somebody from wandering, and that wandering is such a threat to the safety of the patient. Or turn off the stove as the patient approaches, because leaving the stove on is such a threat to the patient. So those sorts of responses to body movement that could be sensed might be a place to start in terms of just the safety of the patient. But the complexity of the problem is daunting, and I think that's one of the reasons that we've been struggling to come up with these technologies.
Right. I agree, Dr. Cummings. It's I don't think there's one thing. And as I was telling the stories earlier, remember, this is a journey, but it's a journey that you can't quite anticipate what the next step is going to be. So I think it's going to be a variety of things based on first of all, the stage of Alzheimer's that the patient is in. Which technologies will work best, and then also trying to be a little bit anticipatory in terms of what you need to really prepare yourself for with the person that you're caring for. But every situation is very, very different, and so I would love to see just a kaleidoscope of options and technologies that are very, very well integrated. So, as the conditions on the ground for the caregiver begins to change and that landscape begins to shift up other them, they have readily available technologies or solutions. And it's not all just about technologies, because a lot of the solutions has nothing to do with digital technologies. But just having that readily available plethora of options that they can leverage that really fits the uniqueness of the situation that they're in. But I would definitely say there's not one game changer, because it is such this is one of those type of games that it has no rules and it changes all the time.
Alex, final thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's what all technology designers need to realize, is the dynamic nature of this disease. And this is really where new approaches such as artificial intelligence and machine learning and big data can play a huge role, because these types of technologies have the capability to sense and understand if a change is occurring and to adapt the way the technology works for the person. And this is critical for the future of anything to do with technology and dementia.
Thank you. And your question, I hope, ties into my close, because this is really the start of the journey, the very beginning. And I think the opportunity is, there are lots of opportunities. I think medicine has promised for a long time. 10 years' time, there'll be a cure. In 10 years' time, there'll be a cure. I believe there's a real opportunity in keeping people in their homes longer. And I think that's good for everyone. So I think that's a very ripe area. It's very doable. There's technologies today. They just need to integrate. But this is, again, you've just made a nice link to my close. So firstly, just want to thank everybody for their time today. As you can tell, this is a massive challenge. It's an unprecedented challenge. It's been talked about as the 21st century ticking time bomb. And really what we're saying is, don't work alone. We want to work together. You've got a lot of expertise in this GCAD panel, along with the technology and development and design expertise out there. Let's not design something and then see if it fits after the fact. Let's design something together. And I think all the articles and the journals you read says that's the secret of the success. If you can put ego aside and build together, you're going to end up with a far better product. So we're really asking to work with you. As you've seen, technology is really converging with medicine rapidly and advancing both scientific research, but as well as everyday practical solutions on the ground for people with all sorts of serious diseases. So in July, Otsuka is actually going to be hosting, along with, I should say, Professor Robot or Professor Mihalides, an actual pitch session. where if you would like to take up this mission, you can choose to share your idea with this community. So this session is actually going to be hosted at the largest Alzheimer's get-together of the year. You'll have all the leaders from research, medicine, and industry will be there. And over the next 6 months, you'll be able to work with members of GCAD, which is this group, but it extends into other areas, finance, policy, as you saw from the logo. You know the technology, we know Alzheimer's. Together we want to work together to really unstick the status quo of this disease. We're setting up an online submission form that you should have seen up on the screens. You can also pick up contact information in the back of the room from these people. You can leave fish bowls in the back of the room. There's actually people waving in the back. So please just drop your card in the fish bowls. And just finally, I'd like to thank the speakers, including Professor Michaelides. Thank you for your time. I really hope we can work together. There's 47 million people out there struggling with this disease. And more importantly, there's millions of people out there who care for them as well.